One small mistake can cost someone their life. In this video, we'll explore 5 real stories of deaths caused by tiny, often overlooked errors. From a simple oversight to a brief lapse in judgment, these incidents started off as harmless until they spiraled into devastating tragedies. These are not just accidents. They're haunting reminders of how fragile and unpredictable life can be when the smallest details go wrong.
My wife and I had to make the most difficult decision of our lives, which was, after multiple EEGs showed little to no brain activity, the decision was made to take Emily off of life support.
It was February 26th, 2006, in Cleveland, Ohio, a day that should have marked the end of a nightmare for the Jerry family. Their little girl, Emily, just 2 years old, had spent over a year battling a brutal form of cancer. The tumor in her abdomen was shrinking. Her doctors were smiling. They told her parents that Emily was beating the odds. This final round of chemotherapy wasn't even necessary, really. It was just a precaution. One last step before they could finally take their daughter home, cancer-free. Her parents were already planning the celebration. That morning, Emily was her usual self, brave, bubbly, full of light. No one imagined that within hours she would be fighting for her life, not because of cancer, but because of a tiny, invisible mistake. The hospital pharmacy was under pressure. It was a weekend. They were short-staffed, and to make matters worse, the computer systems had gone down. Orders that were usually processed and double-checked electronically now had to be done by hand. Amid the chaos, a pharmacy technician, a woman who wasn't licensed, who had never been properly trained, was asked to prepare Emily's IV bag. A small task, a routine step, but one that would carry devastating consequences. She didn't know how dangerous it was to get it wrong. She didn't even pause as she grabbed the wrong solution, a 23.4% sodium chloride mixture instead of the standard 0.9%. That's not just a small difference. It's poison. It's like fire in a child's veins. She wasn't the only one who missed it. The supervising pharmacist, Eric Kropp, was overwhelmed. Delays, backlogs, stress piling up. He gave the bag a glance, but not the second look that could have saved a life. Emily never saw it coming. None of them did. The IV was administered. At first, everything seemed normal. But within minutes, Emily clutched her head in agony. She cried out. Her mother, Kelly Jerry, held her close, confused, frightened. Emily asked for a sip of soda, but after just one drink, she vomited. Her tiny body went limp. Panic spread through the room. Doctors rushed in. Nurses scrambled. Monitors blared. Emily was slipping away right in front of them, her body shutting down. Scans showed her brain was swelling violently. The salt had overloaded her system. Her brain couldn't take it. Emily was placed on life support. Her parents watched as their daughter, so close to recovery, so full of life just hours before, drifted away from them. And on March 1st, 2006, she was gone. A child who beat cancer, killed by a bag of fluid. The grief was unbearable. The rage was quiet but deep, because this didn't need to happen. A little girl died not because of a disease but because of human error, because someone didn't check, because a technician was thrown into a job she wasn't trained for, because the system let it all slip through. Emily's parents, Kelly and Christopher Jerry, were shattered, but they weren't silent. In their daughter's name, they began to fight, not for revenge, but for reform, for answers, for accountability. At the time, Ohio didn't require pharmacy technicians to be licensed or even trained. That fact alone was unthinkable, and it had cost them everything. They pushed for change, and they got it. In 2009, Emily's Law was passed in Ohio, mandating that pharmacy technicians be trained, tested, and registered before handling any medication. It was a hard-won battle, but it came too late for Emily. At the time, studies estimated that over 250,000 Americans were dying each year from preventable medical errors. And yet, it took the death of a bright, beautiful 2-year-old to shake people awake. It was a quiet night in rural New York, April 15th, 2023, just after 10 p.m. In the small town of Hebron, a group of friends were trying to find a party. In the passenger seat of an SUV sat 20-year-old Kaylin Gillis. She had just graduated high school, a bright, creative soul with a passion for animals and a dream of becoming a marine biologist. That night, she was laughing, scrolling through her phone, maybe glancing at her boyfriend, Blake, who was behind the wheel. They were with 2 others, driving slowly down unfamiliar roads, doing what young people do, chasing a good time in a town where GPS signals tend to disappear, and landmarks all look the same. They missed a turn. The SUV eased into a long, secluded driveway. They didn't even step out. They realized almost instantly they were in the wrong place and started to back out. Just a harmless U-turn in the dark. Nothing more. But someone was watching. Kevin Monahan, 66 years old, heard the car pulling in. He lived alone on Patterson Hill Road, a reclusive man in a lonely part of town. He didn't wait to see who it was. He grabbed his shotgun. He came out of the house and fired. The first shot ripped through the silence. The second shot came as the car was turning to leave. It tore through the night and through the SUV, hitting Kaylin in the neck. She hadn't even stepped out of the vehicle. She was just sitting there. Panic set in. Blake slammed his foot on the gas. The friends screamed her name. They couldn't call for help. Not yet. There was no service. They drove for miles, desperate, hoping for a signal, for a light, for anything. By the time they reached Salem and finally dialed 911, it was too late. Kaylin was pronounced dead at the scene. When authorities questioned Monahan, he lied, claimed he'd been in bed, that hunters must have fired the shots. But the truth unraveled quickly. He refused to come out, refused to cooperate. It took over an hour. Negotiations, stalling, a call to his attorney, before he finally surrendered. And as investigators pieced together the night, what they found was chilling. Monahan said he thought the vehicle was a threat. He told the court he fired in self-defense, that the first shot was to scare them off, that the second shot, the one that killed Kaylin, was an accident. He said he tripped on nails on his porch, that the gun went off by mistake. But the jury didn't buy it. Neither did the prosecutor. This wasn't fear. This was rage, the kind that boils just under the surface, the kind that doesn't ask questions before pulling a trigger. Monahan, they argued, wasn't protecting his home. He was punishing strangers for a mistake. And he had a history. Neighbors spoke of past outbursts, confrontations, a man who saw outsiders as threats. The trial didn't last long. 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty, second-degree murder, reckless endangerment, tampering with evidence. In March 2024, Monahan was sentenced to 25 years to life. Judge Adam Molini didn't mince words. The courtroom was heavy with grief. Kaylin's father, Andrew Gillis, stood to speak. He talked about his daughter's laughter, her art, her love of the ocean, a life that had just begun, snatched away in a flash. Blake Walsh, the boy who'd been driving that night, was shattered. He had watched the woman he loved die next to him, helpless to stop it.
Now, moving on to more news from around the world, a horrific incident in the Kansas City has sent shockwaves across the United States, where a mother mistakenly put her 1-month-old infant in an oven for a nap, and the baby died.
It was February 9th, 2024, and 26-year-old Mariah Thomas was home in Kansas City, Missouri, spending time with her 1-month-old daughter, Zariah May. But by the end of that day, their home would turn into a scene so haunting, so impossible to comprehend. Around 1:30 p.m., a 911 call came in. An infant, not breathing. First responders raced to the address in the Manheim Park neighborhood. But when they stepped through the door, what they found wasn't just heartbreaking. It was unspeakable. Zariah was still strapped in her car seat, placed just inside the front entrance. She wasn't moving. Her tiny body was covered in severe burns. The smell of smoke clung to the air. Her clothes had melted into her diaper. A charred baby blanket lay discarded nearby. The Kansas City Fire Department arrived quickly, but it was already too late. Zariah was pronounced dead at the scene. When police questioned Mariah, the story she told seemed too impossible to be real. She said she had meant to put Zariah down for a nap, that she thought she'd laid her baby in the crib, but she hadn't. In a fog of confusion, she had placed her newborn daughter in the oven and turned it on. Even the officers struggled to process what they were hearing. Mariah had been battling serious mental health issues for years. Friends would later reveal she had the emotional mindset of a child, that she stopped taking her medication during her pregnancy. After giving birth, she seemed increasingly unstable. She often posted about feeling invisible, that nobody noticed her anymore. Her friends saw the red flags, but no one imagined something like this. On that afternoon, Mariah called her father in a panic. She told him something was wrong with the baby. He rushed over. As soon as he got to the door, he smelled smoke. He found Zariah, and when he asked Mariah what had happened, her voice trembled as she said, "I thought I put her in her crib, but I accidentally put her in the oven." Mariah was arrested and charged with first-degree child endangerment leading to death, a Class A felony. If convicted, she faces 10 years to life in prison. As she awaits her trial in 2025, the questions multiply. How could this have been prevented? Could someone have helped her? Could Zariah have been saved? Friends who knew Mariah intimately don't describe a monster. They describe a woman lost in her own mind. someone who adored her baby, but couldn't cope with the invisible weight pressing down on her. It was March 2002 in Crosby, Merseyside, when Richard Sumner walked out of his home and vanished. Richard was 47, an artist, a scenic designer who once worked for the Glendoran Opera. He had a mind for detail and a passion for beauty, but there was another side to Richard's life, one far darker. In 1984, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. That moment changed everything. By the late 1990s, his illness had taken over. He couldn't work anymore. His independence slipped away, replaced by financial support and isolation. It was the kind of quiet suffering people rarely see, the kind that unfolds behind closed doors. Richard hated feeling like a burden. He hated needing help. And over time, the weight of that shame turned into something far more dangerous. His sister, Patricia, later said Richard had tried to take his life before. Once, in 1996, he went to the vast, lonely Cloenog forest and handcuffed himself to a tree. He stayed there alone for 4 days. No food, no shelter. Just him and the wind through the trees. And then, he changed his mind. Somehow he managed to free himself. Something in him still wanted to live. But in March 2002, something shifted again. A week before he disappeared, Richard returned to the forest, handcuffed himself to a tree once more, and once more changed his mind. He came home, as if the forest had spoken to him, and he wasn't sure what it had said. Then he went back. This time, no one was with him. No second thoughts. No visible signs of hesitation. He slipped into the dense, silent trees of Cloenog, one of the largest forests in Wales. 40 square miles of shadow and solitude. Somewhere deep inside, Richard found his tree. He wrapped the metal cuffs around his wrist, clicked them shut, and dropped the key. Maybe he thought he'd never want to change his mind again, but what if he did? When a woman walking her dog stumbled upon skeletal remains in April 2005, the truth finally surfaced. Richard had been there the entire time, hidden, waiting to be found. His body had decayed, bones scattered near the base of the tree, his boots still nearby, his jacket shredded by time and weather, but the most chilling detail, the handcuffs were still around his wrist. The tree itself bore deep scratches, raw and ragged, like someone had fought hard to get free. As if, in his final moments, Richard realized he didn't want to die. But by then it was too late. The key was found, just inches away. So close, but still out of reach. What happened next is a mystery no autopsy could answer. At the inquest, even the coroner couldn't declare it suicide. The verdict was left open, because maybe this wasn't the end Richard wanted. Maybe it was the result of a mind pushed too far and a moment that slipped out of control. For Richard's family, especially his mother Marie, the discovery only confirmed what they had feared since the day after he left. That was when she got the letter. A short note, an apology. Richard had known what he was doing, or at least thought he did. But was he sure? That's the question that haunts everyone who hears this story. Not just how he died, but whether in those final hours he wished he hadn't. Whether he regretted the decision the moment he heard the cuffs click shut. Whether he scratched at that tree not because he was desperate to die, but desperate to live. It was a warm, quiet Sunday, April 16th, 2023 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. 36-year-old Carisha Johnson was 9 months pregnant, just days away from welcoming her daughter into the world. She was radiant with anticipation. That morning, she slid into her white sedan, headed to a holiday gathering in North Carlton. A simple drive, a short visit. Just another moment of joy to share with friends before her life changed forever with the arrival of her baby girl. But Carisha never made it to the party. As she turned down the street near the gathering, something unimaginable unfolded. A mistake, so small, so senseless, would rewrite everything. Unbeknownst to Carisha, a group of teenagers nearby had been on edge. Earlier that evening, someone had recklessly fired gunshots into the air near the event. No one was injured, but fear rippled through the crowd. Tensions soared. The teens, shaken and angry, were on high alert. So when Carisha's white sedan rolled into view, they panicked. Without confirmation, without a second thought, they decided her car matched the one from the earlier incident. They convinced themselves she was the threat. And then they opened fire. Carisha never had a chance. Bullets ripped through her vehicle as she tried to drive away, likely confused, terrified, unaware of why she was being attacked. The gunfire was relentless. Moments later, her car slowed, then stopped. By the time first responders arrived, Carisha and her unborn daughter were gone, shot dead over a mistaken identity. The scene was one of chaos and heartbreak. Officers found her slumped in the front seat, lifeless, a life that had nurtured another within it. A mother, a baby, gone in an instant. News of the shooting spread quickly. It didn't take long for investigators to piece things together. Security footage captured the cold truth. 3 young men aiming their guns directly at Carisha's car. No warning, no second guessing, just brutal, thoughtless action. Within hours, the suspects were identified. 19-year-olds Mark Porch, Gregory Parker, and Derek Curry. All 3 were arrested. All 3 admitted to being armed. Porch, a former corrections officer fired just months before, had even provided the weapons used in the attack. They truly believed Carisha's car was the same one from the earlier gunfire, but they were wrong. Horribly, fatally wrong. Porch himself was injured by an unknown shooter while fleeing the scene, adding more chaos to an already senseless tragedy. Yet it didn't change the fact an innocent woman, days away from giving birth, had been murdered because no one paused to ask questions. They were charged with second-degree murder and first-degree feticide. But even legal justice couldn't begin to heal the hole left behind. Carisha wasn't just a name in the headlines. She was a mother to 2 young children who would now grow up without her warmth, without her laugh. She was a friend, known for her infectious energy and unmatched loyalty. She would give you the shirt off her back, said her friend Deanna Williams, struggling through tears. She was the goofiest, most loving person, and now she's gone, over nothing. The community was shattered. Easter turned into mourning, a baby shower that would never happen, a nursery that would never be used, all because someone made a mistake. This wasn't just a crime, it was a collapse of reason, a moment where fear overtook judgment, where young men acted on impulse instead of facts, and the cost? A mother and her unborn child. It's the kind of tragedy that makes you pause, that makes you think about how quickly life can unravel when the wrong people jump to conclusions. One misjudged detail, one rash decision, one car that looked a little too familiar,